Hello and welcome to the Story Behind the Stories, your weekly look at the pages of the Neepawa Banner Press. I'm Eoin Devereux, news reporter with the Banner Press, welcoming you once again to the show right here on NAC TV. And thank you very much for spending a little bit of your time right here with us. Joined this week by news reporter Casper Wehrhahn. Casper, good to have you in again this week.
Thank you for having me here, and a little thankful that I seem to so far not have melted from the heat. It's been pretty warm here, hasn't it, Eoin?
The last week, the temperatures have been unbelievably warm out and about in Neepawa and throughout Manitoba, quite honestly. Just the humidity as well. We actually were talking about this before the show. Some of the things of tornado watch, tornado warnings in areas a little further away from us, over by Rapid City and all that, from the huge storm that came down there recently. It hit us to a degree, but we haven't been. That would be news.
Oh yes.
That would be something to talk about. But again, I'm going to use this as a little bit of an excuse. I'll be honest with you. This is a bit of an excuse. The real reason, don't tell Ken Waddell this, is I was feeling a little bit lazy for most of this week. But I'm going to attribute that to the weather being as warm as it was, because it's a relatively light edition of the paper this week. It's only 16 pages. We're able to squeeze it all into those accumulated 16 pages. We do have some important news stories, though, just not as many as we normally do. I promise you I'm going to put in a better effort next week once the air conditioning kicks in the office. You know, Ken Waddell bought us a new air conditioner in there, so we got two running at full power right now. We got fans pretty much set up anywhere and everywhere you can put them. If you've ever been in the Neepawa Banner Press building and you've walked into the back, you know as you're walking down that long hallway, it's about 3/4 of the way down, just before you hit the entranceway into the Banner and Press portion of it. That wave of heat just sort of hits you, doesn't it, Casper?
It really does. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, old building struggles. We don't have like an updated cooling system and all that sort of stuff. But the little extra air conditioning unit that we have hooked up right now to one of our windows on the side there has been helping a lot, I admit. Yesterday I was amazed. I wasn't sweating. I wasn't like uncomfortable. Obviously still kind of like sticky from the humidity, but I was just like, wow, I'm not like dying. It really was such a relief, especially after of course, days leading up to us getting that AC unit, but also on the weekend, I happened to be up at Clear Lake, so I had some time and spending some time with some friends there. And I happened to catch a look at myself in the mirror at some point because I'd gone inside for a brief minute, and my face was just like bright red and like dripping sweat. I was like, am I okay? And I had been hydrating the whole I think 3 hours I was out there. I don't know how I sat out there that long. And it was just still so bad. I was really relieved to get home and get in the cool air again.
Really? Out there for 3 hours out in the sun and all that? And I wouldn't have known that, quite honestly, because, again, when I go out there for any extended period of time, I don't tan, I lobster. Essentially, I turn a bright red that first couple days. You must fortunately sort of just... that in-between, that perfect in-between where it doesn't hit you.
Unfortunately not. I am also the same way. I will burn so easily, but my little secret is that it was very overcast, so I was safe.
It was warm, but it wasn't that type of sunny, just right on top.
Yeah, it wasn't that kind of sunny, but still very oppressive heat. There was no wind whatsoever. It was interesting.
Well, honestly, it could be worse though, because even though we do complain a little bit about the heat in this building and the way it impacts us, at least we weren't around in the 1890s or the 1910s or 1920s, because all the people that were in the building at that time, they had to do all this stuff and they had to deal with all that heat, but they were wearing a lot more tweed. All right? They didn't have the poly cotton blends like we do nowadays, so a little bit better, I'd say, as well. So Let's get past the fun and foolishness here. Let's get into the actual news, the meat and potatoes of why we're here and talking to you right here on the Story Behind the Stories. Casper, you got a fantastic story right on the front page about a educational and sports program out of Winnipeg that I didn't even know about myself until you brought it to my attention. That's going to be coming a little closer to home.
Yeah, this was a fascinating thing to be able to write about and learn about. I've said before that this job can be a learning experience and a variation of facets, but especially when you're working on different stories. And this very much was the case. I was able to have a wonderful phone call with owner and coach Chad Solaire, who owns this program, Little Ballers. And yeah, it got its start in Winnipeg in like 2022. He was originally an engineer and was just feeling like, this isn't for me. I don't think I want to keep doing this. So we started up that program, and it combines early childhood education, so like literacy, numeracy, identifying colors and stuff like that, with the general like basketball introduction and stuff. So they go through like basic movements and all of that for basketball. And yeah, it's a wonderful sounding program. Has a variety of age groups that it covers. I think like 10.5 months or 10 months to like 8 years. So a good age range there. And Yvonne Sisley is going to be the regional director and program coordinator here for that program. They're having a free day in August to sort of help gauge interest. Apparently it's already had some good feedback because Solaire has been canvassing the community, seeing if people are interested. But just to, help gauge the interest a bit more, introduce people to the program if they're curious, and then hopefully they're going to have a full program in the fall as well.
What's really interesting, I thought about it as well, is that the fact that it's Neepawa, of all places, of all locales, that is getting sort of this examination. Now, when you think about these sorts of things, you'd think they'd go somewhere like from Winnipeg, they'd expand to Brandon first, or perhaps someplace like Steinbach. So it's wonderful that Neepawa was seen as this special little option there to be able to sort of be next in the list.
Absolutely, yeah, that was something that he talked about as well. Just his past experience, which I'll leave that for you to read. It's great to little background on him. He's a very experienced athlete and coach. He's done some other sports aside from basketball, but I can only fit so much in a story for our paper, so I had to cut some things out, make some difficult decisions. But yeah, he has had experience in the past of going to smaller towns for different sports programs or other youth programs, and he's seen the impact that they have on the community. And it's something that really stuck with him. And he's had communications with people from Neepawa, or formerly from Neepawa, that sort of helped encourage him to come here as well and look at other small towns around Winnipeg, around the province. And it's something that he's very eager to get back into again and expand this to other small towns such as Neepawa.
That's right. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about that, of course, you can find it right on the front page of this week's edition of the Neepawa Banner Press, continued on to page 15. It's an interesting, intriguing way to sort of teach and do it in a way that's very engaging for young people. And I have a feeling it's going to take off in a very positive way here in Neepawa. Of course, our community, very strong Filipino community here, and they love the sport of basketball. I think we all do in one way or another, but it's a part of their passion, much like with many Canadians. Hockey or curling is part of their intrinsic passion that they grow up with. Basketball for Philippines is very much the same way. So this is something that I think that's going to be spotlighted and going to take off because of that. And I hope that we are able to talk about that in future editions of the Banner Press and tell you even bigger and better and brighter things about this program as it reaches our community. All right, let's talk a little bit more sports related, but again, sports for good. Much like the Little Ballers program is intrinsically something positive, progressive, and good for the community, this next story in its own way is also. It's about giving back to those that give back. Neepawa Tigers hockey team recently were able to present a check for $1,000 to Victoria Quilts Canada, the Neepawa chapter of Victoria Quilts Canada, in support of their initiative. They make up all these quilts for those that are dealing with battles against cancer, whether it's the individual themselves, family members. They want to support them in any way, shape, or form they can. They want them to know they are not alone in this, that their families are not alone in this. I have to admit, I didn't know much about Victoria Quilts Canada until I came to Neepawa. Even though I've been in communities like Brandon, Winnipeg, Portage la Prairie, they've never had something to the same degree and the same support that you see it here in Neepawa. It is a national initiative, but in certain pockets of Canada, the support is stronger than others, and Neepawa, quite honestly, is one of the strongest per capita in all of Canada. And they deserve a little bit of support as well. And the Neepawa Tigers hockey team saw that, understood that, and followed through with that support. Every year, usually mid to late January, Neepawa Tigers high school hockey team, they have a fundraising event. The members of the team, the parents, supporters of the team, the coaching staff, they all come together as a collective and they do a fundraising effort. They will pick out one or two specific projects or initiatives that they find that need that little bit of extra help, and they'll push towards it and they'll do something, whether it's 50-50 draws, whether it's a fundraiser through the school, bake sales, things along those lines. A portion of the ticket sales from that one specific game go towards it. And that's what they did in 2023, and boy did they do it in a big way. Now, the $1,000 I told you about for Neepawa's Victoria Quilts Canada, that's not the entirety of the money that was raised. It was much more. If I remember, it was almost around $3,000 or $5,000, I should say. If I remember off the top of my head, that was raised from the collective. So they were able to give it out to a bunch of different little groups and individuals and families through this. So it is incredible to see at that age. I know it's the cliche that teenagers don't really care about anything unless it's on their phone. It's a cliche, it's a tired cliche. And it's an example of a cliche that's not true when you see young people like this doing something so wonderful. They were able to raise the money. They were able to give the check last week to representatives from Victoria Quilt. You can find that story. It is on page 2 of this week's edition of the Banner Press. Collectively, the graduating players from the high school hockey team, about a half dozen of them, and the coach, Troy Brister, they all met at the county courthouse here in Neepawa, along with Audrey Heffel and some of the representatives from Victoria Quilts Canada, Neepawa chapter. We did a bunch of pictures there, and I was very pleased to be able to share the details from this with you. I know some people don't really get into the whole sports thing. If you don't like reading about sports, that's understandable. But even though this is sports adjacent, I think this is one of those ones that I hope you will take a few minutes of your time and read and learn a little bit about it. Always love to be able to share these types of good news stories with you. So, and again, like I said, Casper, it's even though it was a hot day out there by the county courthouse, I was still very glad to be able to go out there and snap the picture and get the details. So
absolutely, yeah, this is a great story. We're always so happy to see things like this happen. And Victoria Quilts, they do a lot of hard work for what they do. And, you know, having them get this great support is just fantastic, and I'm sure it gives a wonderful boost to what they do and help get you know, materials, whatever else that they need to get for their projects. I know they make so many quilts to send out to these individuals, and you know, we see their work from time to time for their annual shows, and it's just fantastic what they do. That's
the amazing thing as well. Talking to Audrey there, and I asked her, because I didn't remember the exact number, how many quilts they actually put together here at this chapter on a yearly basis, and they're able to do, on average, 300 quilts each and every year, which was amazing to me. Already at this point of the year right now, they've slowed down a little bit. It's probably the heat. That's probably the reason it slowed them down a little bit. But they've already done well over 100 quilts for the year. And they expect that it's really going to pick up as they shift into the fall and into the winter. So that's impressive unto itself as well. So, and again, it can get expensive. So kudos to the Tigers and their supporters for stepping up like they did. All right, let's go over, we got a couple pictures that we shared in this week's newspaper of an event that occurred last week just down the road from the Banner and Press building at Fresh Mart. They partner with High Life Foods. They've been a partner for the last couple years, and they partnered again on Friday for this free barbecue event that they had. So I wandered down there, just took a walk down the street just to check it out with my own 2 eyes. Well, actually, maybe my own 4 eyes, and it was fantastic. It was a pleasant day. It hadn't gotten too warm just yet, so it was perfect barbecue weather. They had the barbecue truck out there, the full system. They had it free barbecue that was handed out, and it was amazing to look at. Okay, Casper, maybe I shouldn't share this with you, but and I shouldn't share it with you perhaps, but I got to say it looked amazing, but I don't know if it tasted amazing. I don't eat pork for the most part anymore. It's not for any sort of religious reasons or any sort of reasons I have against the industry as a whole. I think the industry as a whole is wonderful. It's a great part of Neepawa and the area. Reason is because I'll usually share these stories with you about my past, whether you like it or not. In the 90s, I used to work in Brandon. I used to work every Joe job you could imagine before I actually got respectable and got a real career. And one of them for about a 2-year period, Casper, was I worked at a pork processing plant in Brandon. Not going to name names, I'm not trying to put anybody in a negative light. I want that to be very clear. But I worked in the delivery area at first. You just wrap up all the pork, the finished processed pork as it comes through.
Yeah.
You wrap it up, you put it in there, and you send it off. And that didn't make as much money as if you were on what was called the cut floor. The cut floor was the pork came through on a conveyor belt, and you cut off all the excess skin, fat, and all that. You prepare it, you make it look pretty. Mm-hmm. You make it look nice. So when you're making it look nice, that means as it's coming down the conveyor belt, it doesn't look so nice.
You're dealing with all the nasty parts and all that sort of thing. So yeah.
It's one of those things of, okay, all right, I think I'm going to stick with chicken from now on. Perhaps steak is a better one. And again, I'm not singling out the pork industry, because I'm sure if I went to a poultry farm and saw how the cutlets were made, I'd feel the same way about that. Or perhaps if I went down to a ranch and saw how my top sirloin was top sirloined, maybe I wouldn't. That's why I've never gone to a ranch or a poultry farm ever. Don't ruin meat for me, please. Don't ruin meat for me. Don't ruin the delicious. But again, it was just one of those things of, that's the reality of the industry, and maybe I shouldn't have gone in on that, because the pork industry has been so good to the community of Neepawa. And again, bacon is amazing, ham is amazing. I love ham steaks. And all that type of stuff is just sort of, that's just the way it is. And I sort of told that to the representative that was there. They said, "Oh, do you want to try something?" It's like, "Thank you, but no." I've sort of worked at almost gave it away. I worked at a pork processing plant in Brandon many a year ago, and it sort of turned me off of pork products. Almost did it.
Stick to something you haven't personally cut and cleaned. It's I think everyone knows really like how these things get prepared. It's just a factor of like personally like cutting and cleaning everyone's different. Some people deal with it really well. Some people are just like, okay, this is fine, but I'm probably not going to eat this anymore.
But the thing is, though, again, all the pork that was being prepared at the event, oh my God, it looked amazing. And it smelled, you know that certain barbecue smell?
Yes.
Oh my God. It was just like that right sort of pork blend with a little bit of spices and a little bit of sauce on there. It was like, holy cow. This could turn me around. This honestly could turn me around.
It's making a very convincing argument, hey?
Yep, High Life makes an extremely convincing argument. They most certainly do. Well, let's shift gears now. We're going to talk a little bit about sports. So we've sort of been around the aura of sports and a few of our stories in this week's edition of The Story Behind the Stories. So let's get right into the actual. And we're going to talk a little bit of hockey. On a hot day like this, why not talk about something nice and cool? And that's the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. They had their annual Bantam Draft this past weekend. There's a young man based out of the Inner Lake, Noah Orton, who was drafted first overall by the Winnipeg Freeze. I have to admit, I don't know much about the young man, being an Inner Lake individual. I didn't get the chance to see many of those games out here in Western Manitoba, but I'm going to focus more specifically on the decisions made by the Neepawa Titans. Titans had about 8 selections they were able to make in this year's Bantam Draft, building for the future of the team, and we're just going to touch base on a couple of the most notable ones. 16-year-old Jack Clark. Thank goodness. You know, I hate to say this, but there's some players' names that are just very difficult to say, and Wayne, who does the play-by-play for NAC TV for all the Neepawa Titans games, does such a tremendous job of it, getting all those names right. And I help sometimes with a little bit of color, and I'm sure Jeremy, who's helped with color as well, sort of sometimes some of those players and some of those last names just out of nowhere, it's just like, okay, there's a lot of vowels in this name. This is going to be fun. So I'm very appreciative that an individual named Jack Clark has been drafted by the team. That's going to make things so much easier when that young man gets into the roster there.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of names out there where if you haven't heard it at least once, it's hard to try and nail that pronunciation because you're like, I'm not quite sure if I got that right. Fingers crossed that I did.
But again, Clark, he's a young man from our area, in and around our area. He played for the Southwest Cougars, which is just, a little bit southwest of Brandon. We should be familiar with his style of play. Defenseman, 16-year-old, 9 goals, 9 assists, 39 games with Southwest last year. And of course, you always got to remember, with the Bantam Draft, these, unless it's an exceptional young person, these are players we're not going to see in the lineup next year for the most part. This is 2 years down the line, sometimes even 3 years down the line, but usually it's around 2 years. They need to develop their game, and they stay in AAA for the most part to develop for another year. Some of the most exceptional ones come up to that next level. And hopefully Neepawa is going to be able to get a couple of those exceptional ones. The team does a decent job with its draft each and every year. It finds some diamonds in the rough from time to time. Historically, they've done some very good drafts. Young men, well, not so young men now, who came through the draft included Ashton Anderson, who was with the team for several years, was one of their leading scorers for several years. Really was a huge player for them. Regan Buchanan as well was a great leader for the Titans during his time. During that run, that 2-year run where the team actually made the playoffs and had their most wins in well over a decade. That was a 2-year run, and those were 2 of the individuals who were a big part of that. And hopefully we'll find that success again. It's been a while. Neepawa Titans / Junior A Hockey Club / Natives over the years have always drafted relatively high in the draft, and hopefully they're going to be able to find one or two players that are going to put them over the top so that they don't have to draft in the top 5. They can draft in the bottom 5. That'd be a nice change of pace. So, but again, I'm optimistic this crop of players is going to be able to take things and take this team to the next level. Now, with just a few minutes left, just going to talk about a couple things really quick. We've got our special Father's Day feature in this week's edition of the paper. It's a 1-page, so hopefully you're going to support some of those businesses that support dads, such as Canada Safeway, Neepawa Gladstone Co-op, Mogott's Shopping Center in Laurier, Manitoba. Always appreciate your business, and we always appreciate sharing your message with our readership. So our Father's Day section there as well. Casper, you have a special message you wanted to put out there for everyone. Hopefully you're going to be able to help with a future edition, a very important future edition of the Banner Press.
Absolutely, yes. Some of you may know my big project every year is the Remembrance Day feature that we do for November. And every year we try to do a theme for it just to help it be a little more cohesive, I suppose would be the word. So, you know, it's all sort of unified and all that. And this year we'd really like to try and theme it around letters to home. You know, that was a big thing back in the day, getting those letters from those family members, whether they were overseas or, you know, maybe they were here in Canada still, but working as like an air trainer or something like that. So we'd very much like anyone who has letters like that and photos especially to go along with it that we could use for that section. To bring those to us, if you can drop them in at the office here with your name and contact information, of course, in case we need to reach out to you. Or if you have digital copies, that would be great. You can email them to us. Yeah, it would be so wonderful if we'd be able to get those in and make that section around that and share those stories. It means a lot to be able to do that.
Most definitely, and we do assure you we will take the proper care with those letters, with those pictures, make sure they are returned to you in the same pristine shape that you gave them to us. This section is one we're very particularly proud of each and every year. And when the concept came through about letters to home, it was just like, I just lit up, Casper. It was like, yes, this is it. Because we were at that point right now where we as an office, we weren't quite sure, what are we going to do? We've sort of run out of ideas, haven't we?
Yeah, and that's been the struggle, I think, for the past couple, or at least the last year as well. Because, you know, you can only do the same sort of year span so many times without, you know, reusing materials from your own archives.
Yep.
And, you know, we just happened to get these letters in from Helen, who came into possession for them for the museum, I believe it was.
Yep.
And, you know, just right like that sparked something, and I'm very excited to pursue it.
Having read some of these letters as well, I am so excited when we're going to be able to share this with you come November. This one, I have a feeling if we're able to do it right, this is going to be something special. There's certain features over the years where, you know, we've been very particularly proud of. And this one, I have a feeling, is going to be that one as well. But we need your help to do it. So if you have those letters, you have those pictures, please get in touch with us. You can do it via email at news@neepawabanner.com or via phone at 476-3401. Or if you have any story ideas or suggestions, that's always appreciated, even for the regular weekly paper. 476-3401, the number we can be reached at, or news@neepawabanner.com. Anything sports related, that's always appreciated as well. sports@neepawabanner.com. Any and all aid, always love it. And we always appreciate you taking a little bit of your time and spending it right here on NAC TV with us here at The Story Behind the Story. So Casper, again, good to have you in this week. Always appreciate it.
Absolutely, always great to be here.
And like I said, we always appreciate you, whether you agree with the stories or anything, or we appreciate you taking the time to read them. We take the time to read them in here on NAC TV as well. So keep tuning in and keep listening to the stories behind the stories.